A young, highly educated woman with what seemed like a perfect life suddenly vanished without a trace, right after a romantic dinner with her boyfriend. So where did she go, and why hasn't anyone been able to find her? It all began on a quiet morning in Banqiao District, New Taipei City. On May 23, 2018, the Xinhai police station received a missing person report from a panicked middle-aged couple. They said their daughter, Yimin Huang, had mysteriously disappeared for 3 days without leaving a single note. According to their account, the last known event occurred 3 days earlier when Yimin brought her boyfriend over for dinner with the family. During the warm and intimate evening, the boyfriend suddenly proposed marriage, suggesting they get married by the end of the year. He even took out a pair of matching rings and a pearl necklace, placing them on the table. Everything seemed normal until the dinner ended. The couple returned to their rented apartment on Goguang Road in Banqiao. But around 10 p.m. that night, Yimin's phone suddenly went completely silent. She stopped responding to messages, didn't answer any calls, and her Line account showed no further activity. At first, Yimin's parents assumed she might be working late or had something unexpected come up. But after 2 full days without any contact, they began to worry. They called her boyfriend, but no one answered. When they reached out to his family, they were simply told that he was not at home. With growing unease over the silence from both Yimin and her boyfriend, the Huang family could no longer sit still. They drove to the apartment she was renting. They rang the doorbell over and over again, but no one answered. The place was completely silent. Peering through the crack in the door, they immediately spotted Yimin's familiar handbag inside. She was nowhere to be seen, but her bag was still there, something that made them even more concerned, since they knew Yimin never went out without it. Their instincts told them something was wrong. So, on the morning of May 23rd, the family went to the police station to file a formal report and requested that the authorities break into the apartment. However, the police response was disappointing. According to regulations, unless there are clear signs of danger, law enforcement cannot legally force entry into a private residence. In Yimin's case, there was no blood, no cries for help, and no reports of unusual noise from neighbors, so legally, it didn't qualify as an emergency. While the family scrambled to find a way forward, here's what we know about the missing woman. Yimin Huang, born in 1991, was 27 years old at the time. She graduated from the Department of Foreign Languages at National Chengchi University. After earning her master's degree, she worked as a legal interpreter at the legal division of a pharmaceutical company listed in the Fortune 500. From a personal life perspective, about 6 months before the incident, Yimin Huang met a fitness trainer named Junying Zhu through a dating app. The two quickly bonded over their shared passion for sports and similar language skills. Their lively conversations drew them closer, and before long they began dating and eventually moved in together. Because of this relationship, Yimin's family immediately suspected her boyfriend might be involved after she went missing. On the evening of May 23rd, her older brother posted on Facebook, along with a photo of Yimin, stating that she had been out of contact for 3 days, her phone was turned off, and her location couldn't be traced. He mentioned that Yimin's boyfriend, Junying Zhu, had a prior drug conviction, a history of violent tendencies, and was currently living with her in Banqiao. The family feared she might have been detained by him and pleaded with the online community to help find her. Shortly after the post went live, the online response was swift and intense. The information spread rapidly, gaining thousands of shares within just a few hours. At the same time, the Huang family reached out to Yimin's friends, colleagues, and former acquaintances to look for any clues, and soon managed to connect with a close friend from her university days. This close friend, after seeing the post, suddenly remembered that she had chatted with Yimin just a few days earlier. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it, assuming it was just relationship drama. But when she went back and reread the messages, she was shocked to realize the situation was far more serious than she had initially believed. Without wasting any time, she took screenshots of their conversation and sent them to the Huang family. In the messages, Yimin expressed that her boyfriend was showing signs of being out of control, frequently losing his temper for no reason, screaming in the middle of the night, breaking things around the house, and even threatening to kick her out. In response to those messages, her friend half-jokingly said that if anything bad ever happened, these texts could serve as evidence in court. Yimin's reply was short and haunting. She simply hoped she would come out of it unharmed. Not long after the Huang family shared the chat logs, public attention quickly turned to Junying, Yimin's boyfriend. Instead of contacting the police or her family, he responded by posting a long message on Facebook. In it, he denied any accusations of violence or control, claiming that Yimin was the one who kept trying to reconcile with him. He said he had once accepted her past, but later discovered she had lied to him, leaving him hurt and disappointed. He urged people not to judge the situation from just one side. He didn't stop there. He also attached a screenshot of what he claimed was a message from Yimin. In it, she appeared deeply remorseful, saying she didn't deserve him, admitted to lying, and acknowledged having hurt him. Her tone was full of self-blame, using harsh words to express regret for having disappointed him. Following that message, public opinion on social media began to shift. Many people started to sympathize with Junying, believing that the entire situation stemmed from Yimin's alleged infidelity. In just a few hours, Junying was being portrayed as a heartbroken man, deeply in love, yet mercilessly betrayed. However, that wave of sympathy didn't last long. Internet users soon noticed several red flags in the screenshot. First, in the top left corner of the screen, the phone was clearly in airplane mode, raising the obvious question, how could a message be received without a network connection? Additionally, the tone of the message was odd. It was unusually harsh and self-blaming, something highly uncharacteristic for someone as gentle-natured as Yimin. The suspicion didn't stop there. Many also pointed out that the conversation only showed messages from Yimin, with no replies from Junying, which made the authenticity of the screenshot even more questionable. Moreover, Yimin's Line account had been inactive since the evening of May 20th. None of her colleagues or friends had been able to reach her. So, how could a remorseful message conveniently appear on a phone that only Junying had access to 3 days later? Given the growing number of inconsistencies, internet users reached a collective conclusion. The message was not written by Yimin, but orchestrated by Junying himself. He had likely used her phone to stage a dramatic narrative, casting himself as the victim in order to manipulate public opinion. From that point on, the internet's attention turned to Junying's past, and piece by piece his history began to unravel. It was soon revealed that he had previously been married. In November 2017, his ex-wife had filed for a restraining order against him due to domestic abuse. At the same time, the ex-wife's younger sister came forward and accused Junying of being extremely controlling, forcing marriage, monitoring phone activity, and physically assaulting her sister. To support her claims, she even shared photos showing her sister's body covered in bruises. But the revelations didn't end there. Junying's past in the United States also raised serious concerns. In 2014, he was suspected of involvement in a bank robbery before fleeing back to Taiwan to avoid prosecution. Later, he was implicated in a drug trafficking operation and was sentenced by the court to 3 years and 10 months in prison. What made things even more serious was the fact that Junying had been scheduled to begin serving his prison sentence on May 18th. The prosecutor's office had already issued a formal order, but he completely ignored it and went into hiding. This act of evasion officially placed him on the wanted criminal list. Then came the most chilling coincidence. Just 2 days after he became a fugitive, on May 20th, he was reported to have had his last dinner with Yimin. Most disturbingly, from that moment on, Yimin vanished without a trace. Thanks to pressure from the media, online communities, and Yimin's persistent family, the police finally began taking the case seriously. They reviewed surveillance footage from the building where Yimin and Junying lived. In a video recorded at 10:02 p.m. on May 20th, both were seen entering the building, appearing completely normal. However, after that moment, Yimin vanished from all camera footage. In contrast, Junying's behavior started to raise alarms. Between late night on May 21st and the early morning hours of May 22nd, security cameras captured him wearing a baseball cap, gloves, and keeping his head down to conceal his face. He was seen carrying multiple plastic bags as he exited the building. What stood out even more was that Junying never used the elevator. Instead, he repeatedly chose the stairwell and always walked straight toward the public garden behind the building. At this point, investigators began to suspect that the plastic bags weren't just filled with household trash. Following the path recorded by the surveillance footage, police tracked the trail to the garden area where Junying had been seen. As they inspected the site closely, investigators noticed that the soil appeared recently disturbed, and a corner of a plastic bag was sticking out from the ground. Without wasting time, they put on gloves, brought out excavation tools, and began digging immediately. After only a few shovelfuls, they unearthed a tightly sealed plastic bag. When they opened it for a preliminary check, they discovered biological tissue inside, but couldn't yet determine whether it belonged to a human or an animal. The area was immediately cordoned off, and forensic experts along with prosecutors were called in overnight to continue the investigation. Once the scene was secured, the forensic team arrived and resumed excavating the suspicious plot of land. At the same location, they discovered 6 more plastic bags buried deep underground. Around this time, Yimin's family also arrived on site. Her mother, overcome with emotion upon seeing the bags being pulled from the earth, rushed toward the dig site but was stopped by investigators who tried to calm her and explained that nothing had yet been confirmed. It didn't take long before the results came back. Forensic analysis revealed that the 7 plastic bags, when assembled, formed the dismembered body of a woman. DNA testing confirmed that the remains belonged to Yimin Huang. The autopsy reported that the cuts on the bones were clean and precise, indicating that this wasn't an act of spontaneous violence, but a deliberate and calculated dismemberment. But the horror didn't end there. The hair on the victim's head had been completely shaved off. Not a single strand remained. Even more disturbing, all internal organs were missing, and a large portion of tissue from the left thigh down to the middle of the knee had been completely removed. Faced with these shocking details, a former investigator suggested that there might still be an 8th plastic bag yet to be discovered. As a result, authorities immediately deployed K-9 units to return to the scene and launch a large-scale search operation. Leaving no possibility unexplored, investigators searched everything, from the basement and septic tanks to the entire drainage system around the complex. They even pulled engineering blueprints for the building's entire plumbing system and checked every detail. 1 week later, they discovered an 8th plastic bag in an old drainage ditch near the residential area. Inside was the missing section of the thigh, but the internal organs were still nowhere to be found. However, just as police confirmed the identity of the remains and began preparing an arrest warrant for Junying, the situation spiraled out of control. At dawn on May 28th, the 8th day since the investigation began, Sinzing District Police Station in New Taipei City received an emergency call. On the other end was a sanitation worker, who frantically reported finding a man hanging in a public restroom. When officers arrived at the scene, they found it was an abandoned public building in severe disrepair. Inside, the body of a man was hanging from a rusted metal bar attached to a broken window frame. Beneath him was a collapsed plastic chair, and scattered around were pieces of toilet paper with handwritten notes. Although the man had no ID on him and was dressed casually, investigators quickly identified the deceased as Junying, the prime suspect in Yimin's murder case. The scene showed no signs of external interference, and the time of death was estimated between 2 and 3 a.m. that morning. Next to the body, the handwritten notes on the toilet paper remained intact. In them, Junying confessed to making a grave mistake, saying there was no turning back and the only way out was to repay a life with a life. He claimed to suffer from severe mental illness, stating that whenever his symptoms flared up, he lost all control. In a message to his parents, he expressed regret for keeping everything hidden, saying he was afraid the truth would devastate them. Shortly after, police contacted Junying's family to come and identify the body. Many believed the sensational murder case was finally coming to a close, but in reality, the deeper mysteries surrounding Yimin's death were only just beginning to surface. That same morning, Junying's father arrived at the scene. Upon seeing his son's lifeless, bluish face and stiff body, the man broke down completely. He collapsed onto the ground, sobbing uncontrollably as he hugged his son and muttered through tears, blaming him for taking the most painful way out. I told you to face the consequences like a man, he cried. Why did you choose this instead? But by early afternoon, something unexpected happened. A man called the police and repeated, word for word, the emotional statements made by Junying's father at the scene, even though he claimed he had never met the man before. This shocking detail immediately raised red flags. Authorities swiftly launched a new review of all surveillance records this time to trace Junying's actions leading up to and following his alleged suicide. That move proved critical. Police uncovered a key surveillance camera clip that became the turning point in piecing together the events of the case. By cross-referencing it with investigative files, they reconstructed a detailed timeline and clarified the roles of everyone involved, including Junying's parents. Specifically, at 10:02 p.m. on May 20th, Yimin appeared on camera for the last time. She was seen walking a few steps ahead of Junying as they entered their rented apartment together. The next morning, at 9:42 a.m. on May 21st, Junying was caught on camera opening the door to receive a food delivery. Based on this timestamp, investigators suspected Yimin may have already been killed by then. At 12:48 p.m. the same day, Junying's mother, Chunliu Su, unexpectedly appeared at the apartment. Security footage showed she stayed inside for exactly 7 minutes before leaving at 12:55 p.m. This raised serious questions about whether Mrs. Su might have known what had occurred inside the unit. Later that night, between 11:30 p.m. and 1:45 a.m., Junying was seen entering and exiting the building multiple times. Each time he left, he carried a heavy backpack and several plastic bags. When he returned, however, the bags were gone and the backpack looked significantly lighter. Police later confirmed that this was the time when Junying was disposing of Yimin's remains. Just hours later, at 8:41 a.m. on May 22nd, both of Junying's parents appeared at the apartment. 6 minutes later, the three of them left together. In the footage, Junying's father is seen holding what looked like bedding in one arm and pulling a black suitcase with the other. This scene sparked intense speculation online. What exactly was inside that suitcase? As the investigation deepened, police revisited the apartment to collect more evidence, and they immediately noticed disturbing irregularities. The entire space had been meticulously cleaned. The kitchen floor and drainage system showed signs of recent scrubbing. Most notably, when luminol was applied near the kitchen sink, it reacted positively for blood. In the trash bin, investigators found shredded towel pieces and several empty bottles of bleach. Reviewing the suspicious activity timeline, police searched a storage cabinet near Junying's bedroom door and recovered a knife approximately 23.6 inches long. Forensic analysis later confirmed the presence of Yimin's DNA on the blade. This crucial evidence dramatically shifted the course of the investigation. Police were no longer focused solely on identifying the killer. They now turned their attention to the potential involvement of Junying's parents. From there, the investigation expanded to include surveillance footage from Junying's parents' residence in Taoyuan. The data revealed that around 11:30 p.m. on May 23rd, Junying had returned to his parents' house and stayed until early the next morning. The disturbing part? By that time, Yimin had already been reported missing by her family, yet Junying was quietly retreating to his parents' home during this critical window. Because of this discovery, investigators immediately shifted their focus to uncovering the connection between Junying and his parents. Police quickly brought in Chunliu Su for questioning. In front of investigators, she remained calm and explained that she went to the apartment on May 21st to care for her son, as she believed Junying was showing signs of mental instability. As for her return on May 22nd, she claimed it was only to help him move out. She insisted she had no further contact with Junying after that day and was unaware of what had happened. However, the evidence quickly contradicted her statement. Surveillance footage showed that between 11:30 p.m. on May 23rd and the early hours of May 24th, Junying had returned to his parents' residence in Taoyuan. When confronted with the footage, Chunliu claimed she had no knowledge of this and suggested she may have been asleep at the time. When asked when she first became aware that her son had killed Yimin, she simply replied that she only found out after hearing about Junying's suicide. Around the same time, police also questioned Junying's father, Ding Guozhu. At first, he stated the last time he saw Junying was on May 22nd, when he helped him move out, and that they had not spoken since. But under further questioning, he changed his statement, admitting that at 2 a.m. on May 27th, Junying had called the house but hung up immediately after he answered. Once again, surveillance footage disproved this version of events. At 2 a.m. on May 27th, cameras captured Dingo and Chunliu driving home, with Junying in the back seat. Faced with undeniable evidence, Dingo confessed that they had picked up their son, but claimed he didn't ask any questions and was hoping Junying would turn himself in. As the investigation deepened, police proposed polygraph tests for both parents. Dingo agreed to take the test, while Chunliu declined, citing psychological distress and claiming she was not mentally stable enough to handle the pressure at that time. Initially, the prosecutor's office considered filing criminal charges against both parents. However, after detailed interrogations, they concluded that although the couple had displayed repeated suspicious behavior, there was insufficient evidence to prove they had any direct knowledge of or involvement in the crime. Yimin's family strongly opposed this decision and rejected the prosecution's conclusion. Since criminal liability wasn't pursued, they turned to civil court, filing a lawsuit demanding $350,000 in damages. The family argued that Junying's parents clearly knew he was involved in Yimin's death, yet failed to alert the police. Worse, they accompanied him to clean the apartment and remove several items. To them, this was not just concealment, it potentially amounted to aiding and abetting the destruction of evidence. During the civil trial, Yimin's family presented footage showing that at 12:18 p.m. on May 21st, Chunliu traveled from Taoyuan to the scene of the crime and stayed for only 7 minutes before leaving. Chunliu testified she went to care for Junying due to his unstable mental state. However, the plaintiff's side argued that it was highly unreasonable to make an hour-long trip just to stay 7 minutes, and that her explanation did not match her previous testimony. Based on this line of reasoning, Yimin's family began to suspect that right after committing the crime, Junying may have contacted his mother to help dispose of the body. The next morning, at exactly 8:41 a.m. on May 22nd, Dingo and Chunliu appeared at the apartment. 6 minutes later, all 3 members of the Ju family were seen leaving the building. Dingo was carrying what appeared to be bedding and pulling a black suitcase. These same items were later found discarded in a recycling bin near their residential complex. What's striking is that during police interrogation, Junying's parents denied ever returning to the scene, and even claimed they had not been back to the apartment in over 3 years. Only after police presented surveillance footage did they finally admit the truth. Faced with such contradictions, Yimin's family raised a pressing question. If someone had just been murdered and both parents entered the apartment afterward, how could they not have seen blood or noticed the odor of a decomposing body? They argued that this wasn't a coincidence, but rather evidence of prior coordination. Of course, these suspicions, no matter how compelling, could not substitute for concrete legal evidence. When the court reached its final verdict, the judges chose to put their trust in a single line from Junying Ju's suicide note, in which he apologized to his parents for not telling them the truth, saying he feared they wouldn't be able to bear the pain. Based on this note, the court interpreted it as a deeply personal reflection of Junying's mental state at the time of his death. As such, the final ruling concluded that while the plaintiff had raised several plausible and concerning questions, there was no direct evidence proving the parents' intent or awareness. Since the defendants fully denied involvement and investigators could not gather enough evidence to contradict their claims, the court had no grounds to convict them of wrongdoing. In addition, regarding Dingo's emotional remark at the morgue, where he said he had repeatedly taught his son to face the truth bravely, the court considered this to be a spontaneous, emotional outburst and not a legally admissible confession. As a result, the $350,000 civil compensation request filed by Yimin's family was officially denied in appellate court. In closing, the court issued a human-centered message, acknowledging that both families had suffered an irreplaceable loss. Under such tragic circumstances, the court encouraged the parties involved to set aside hostility, listen to each other's pain, and seek a path toward healing so that the deceased may rest in peace and the living may find peace of their own. The ruling has been handed down, but what continues to haunt this case is the deafening silence from those closest to her. Because in the end, the most unsettling question is not just who committed the crime, but rather, who knew the truth and chose to remain silent. What do you think about this case? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this video compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss the next true crime story.